We'd like to welcome all of you once again to Saturday's Story. I have a special story today, a story that applies to every one of you, no matter who you are, what walk of life you're in, this story applies. This is a strange video that you're about to view. What you're viewing is a beautiful red bird, a red bird that sees a reflection of himself and perceives that this is an enemy. This enemy must be destroyed. I've got to destroy this enemy. And this red bird incessantly sees himself and wars with his own self until finally he almost knocks himself out. There's blood and feathers on the mirror, and yet he feels like I've got to take care of this enemy, when the truth is he's fighting with his own flesh. But isn't this where we all are? No wonder the Apostle Paul wrote these words in the book of Romans chapter 7 and verse number 23. He said, "But I see another law in my members, warring against the law of my mind and bringing me into captivity to the law of sin, which is in my members." And he said that law says that when I would try to do good, evil is present with me. It is the struggle of the ages, ladies and gentlemen. It is the war between the flesh and the spirit. You see, that's why he went on to say in verse 24, "O wretched man that I am, who shall deliver me from the body of this death?" The struggle is that if you're fighting against yourself, you cannot win, but it is the struggle of the ages. And this brings me today to Saturday's story. It's the story of Jim and Joe. Jim and Joe decided as they got old enough that they would go into trapping, and so they moved to the North Country, and they did quite well. They had their trap lines, and they were doing really good. But there was a certain time of year when the weather would just lock them in. You didn't measure the snow by inches, you measured the snow by feet. And we all know a little bit about quarantine. Here they were, locked in a one-room cabin alone. They could only go out for just a little while because the temperature was below zero. They couldn't stay out long, and they would come back in, but yet it was the loneliness that seemed to just wear away. So you see, something happened. Jeb got sick. Well, there was nothing that Joe could do. There was no way to get to a doctor, no way to get him out. They were frozen in, and here they were. He only got worse until finally Jeb died. And now Joe was now dealing with, what am I going to do with this dead man? He stayed in the cabin all that day, and that evening Joe had to make a decision. I got to get him out. What to do? So he drug him out and buried him in a snowbank. And you see, it was a fitful rest that night because it was traumatic. He lost his best friend in the world, but he dozed off in the night, and when he woke up that morning, something strange was happening. He just didn't know what until he rolled over. Oh, no. There lay Jeb, his eyes glaring and staring right at him. There was no place in the cabin to escape. He got up and made coffee, but there was no way to get away. Everywhere he went, the glaring, staring eyes of Jeb would hunt him down. What am I going to do? How did this happen? How did he get back? Surely there's got to be an explanation. Now we know about this because he wrote it down in his diary. And so you can imagine when the nightfall came. Yes, that evening, he drug him back out and buried him again. That's all he knew to do. That's all he could do. But there was fitful rest that night. You can imagine he didn't sleep much, but weariness will overtake you. And before dawn, Joe went to sleep. And when he woke up with a start, he said, God, is he going to be here? Is Jeb going to be back again? And suddenly he rolled over. Oh, oh, oh. And there he was. Yes, the same glaring, staring eyes of Jeb, penetrating and looking through him. He turned his face and grabbed his head and said, oh, help me. How? There's no explanation for this. So you see, when the spring's thaw came, and the people came to the north country, they found two bodies. One with a bullet hole in his head, and the other died of natural causes. Now we know about this because it was written down in a diary. Because the true story was that Joe didn't recognize his own footsteps, that went back in the night and drug Jeb back into his life again, until finally the dead killed the living. This is why Paul talked about it. He talked about the dead and beggarly elements of the world that is sent to destroy us. That the dead, my friend, will finally kill the living. If I'm talking to someone, if there's someone that I'm ministering to right now that just seems to go back in the unconscious world of your mind and drags back in those dead beggarly elements of life, I'm talking to you. Leave it dead. Leave it buried. Let God take care of it, because He will take care of it. Because you see, you don't want that epitaph that finally the dead did kill the living. If you today are living this out, I implore you to just release it and let the dead stay buried. If you've enjoyed this story, I ask you to share it. Thousands of people are waiting for you to share. God bless you today for tuning in.